Hello, this is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI, coming to you from the Rogue River in Southern Oregon. Today we're going to follow up on a previous presentation that I did on using Google Earth for biogeometry and to map out large areas. Today we're actually going to talk a little bit about how I prepare before I go to the site, and then I'm actually going to go to the site and actually do some work there, and then we are going to wrap that up with some of the things I found and actually put those on a project in Google Earth. But we're going to talk about a lot of other aspects also. So today I'd like you to actually refer to this slide. I'm going to turn my head here because my presentation's on my other computer, so forgive me for not looking directly at the screen. But as we talk a bit about this, what I'd like to talk about is, as you know, I have a property which I call Eagle Medicine Ranch, and it's in Eagle Point in Southern Oregon. And this is a project that's probably going to take me about 3 years to complete. But in this project, I'm actually going to remodel the house. But the first thing I want to do is get the land ready. That's why when I did the first video, I actually looked at the overall, view of the property and tied it into some sacred power spots. And we're going to talk about that a bit more as I look at the photo. But as I do this, there's some things that I want to talk about because the first thing I want to do is I want to use what we call in biogeometry, the Bg3 pendulum, to look for power spots or energy vortexes. I talked about this a little bit in quite a few of my videos, but if you're new to this is what we call the Bg3 pendulum. And that is basically the three resonances that this pendulum will pick up. And it's based on what Ibrahim Karim, who's the founder of biogeometry, talks about, the planes of nature. So each of these shapes in this pendulum reflect a plane of nature. And the way that the pendulum works is that you are the antenna. This is not mental dowsing. I go into great detail on some of the other videos if you want to watch those about what mental dowsing is and what radiesthesia is. And that's called when you use these biogeometry pendulums, because you become the antenna, your DNA becomes the antenna. You begin to draw in energies and forces that are at work in the earth and in the cosmos and in the different spiritual planes. So in each plane, there is different energies, and this pendulum allows you to connect what we call your subtle bodies with those energy features and being able to identify where those energy features are and where they're located on the earth. So one of the first things I do after I kind of tie the project into the overall schema of the area and the environment and the larger picture, I then actually will pull the site up on Google Earth and zoom in a bit. And I'll do probably 2 photos, which I just use snippet to cut out of Google Earth and put onto some type of presentation material, whether it be into a PDF format or into PowerPoint or something like that. Right now I'm using PowerPoint because sometimes I like to just kind of do a collage of different things as I talk. And so that's what I'm going to do now and use some of these ideas that I'm talking about. So as I talked about before, I'm going to use this Bg3 pendulum to find some power spots. And as we look at the pendulum, we can see the difference. So the discs are for the mental planes, and we have downward, pointing cones and so on and so forth, upward, different forms that will allow us to pick up this Bg3, which is a higher harmonic of gold, the ultraviolet, now, and actually some orange also, which I had covered in a previous video also. And these are these higher harmonics, which they found at Coptic Christian saints' tombs, and they called it Bg3 for biogeometry 3, which is negative green also. So as we look for these power spots, and again, we're not looking for the Hartman-Curry lines, which are the actually Earth energy grids. We're just looking for these spots that emanate Bg3. And the reason I do this is because this is where you want to put your, like any planters you may have, any places that you really want to take advantage of the vortex. Because when you look at this right here from Walter Russell's diagrams, if you can remember from some of the work we did with Walter Russell about the vortex, about the gravitational vortex, which goes in a clockwise direction, and then the radiation or the radiating vortex, which is the opposite of the gravitational vortex, which goes in the counterclockwise direction and goes out. So the gravitational axis spins in a clockwise direction into the Earth, and the radiative vortex spins out from the Earth back to the sun in a counterclockwise direction. So what we want to do is take the pendulum, and then we want that to spin in a clockwise direction over the area that we're looking at. And as I said, the first thing I do is I use a photograph. Now, photographs aren't always that accurate, but they do give you an idea when you're working with large areas. You don't spend all day just trying to find some areas you're looking for. And so I printed up these photographs and I used the pendulum over them. And I found that there was really 2 or 3 major power spots that I could locate on the photograph. One was in this area here, which was a flat area, which is facing the southwest and to the south. So this is west, this is south, this is east, and this is north over this way. So I found this one. I found the other one here, which I call Mother Madrone, which is on the tree, a big Madrone tree that sits here. And then back here, I found another one, which I'm probably going to make into what I call my Faery Grotto. So this is the outline of the property here. And these are some lines that are coming in from some other aspects that we're going to talk about later. So once I kind of find these areas that I'm looking for, I can begin to decide what it is I want to do. And when I go out to the property, I'm actually going to verify that these actually exist on the property. Now, the original owner had set up his garden over in this area, but currently I'm not really, just from the photograph itself, I'm not finding any power spots there. So it might not be the best place for the garden. It may be better over here in this area. This area, like I said, it's on a slope, it's going downhill. It's on the north side, so it's probably not going to be a good area for a garden, but because it's remote, it would be very good for a fairy grotto or an area to really commune with nature. So as I begin to look at this overall energies, really what I want to do is I want to begin to say, where do I want to put my planting beds? So where do I want to create, like say, maybe my areas where I want to have my habitat for my butterflies, my moths, and so on, and the pollinators. Because as you start getting into a project like this, like I said, it's going to take 2 to 3 years. It takes 2 to 3 years to actually get fruit trees and actually some of your other plants up and producing, like asparagus and some of your other vegetables that you may want to grow. So how I'm gonna approach this is, because it can be very expensive when you start a gardening project, as you may know. You have to get, a good soil, you have to make planters, you got to make irrigation. So the first thing that I want to do is actually keep that to the lowest cost I can do, and actually make it to where it's not so permanent that if over the 3 years I find some issues, I can begin to adjust without getting into major expense and a major time in tearing it down and moving it. So I decided that I'm going to go with what they call the Hugelkultur method, where you can just take logs, either stand them upright if you have logs on your property, and you can create these raised beds out of just these logs. And what will happen over time, they'll begin to break down. They look very natural. They're very healthy. You don't have a lot of toxins seeping from these logs that are on your property. And over time, they will decompose and add back to the soil. And you can either like stand them upright, like with when you have larger stumps, or you can lay them vertically, horizontally. And you can line them with cardboard if there's big gaps between them. So that cardboard will break down over time and again, add to the soil. So as you make these planters, they're very cheap, right? This is found material. The cardboard's cheap. You line the bottom with cardboard also. If you want to, when you start using these horizontal, like straighter pieces of lumber or straighter branches and so on, you can drive in either 1/2 inch rebar or 3/4 inch concrete form stakes. And you can begin to make these beds. The other thing that I purchased, spent the money on, was chipper, because back here in the back of my property, this whole area, and even all over the place, I have lots and lots of down trees and leaves and other debris that I can chip up and fill these beds with. So I don't have to spend all my money on topsoil. I don't have to spend all the money getting the topsoil in there. So I'm going to create some of these Hugelkultur raised beds in the power spot areas. And then I'm also have purchased what they call these cloud busters, which are Orgone, which is through Wilhelm Reich, which his discovery was, where you can mix different resins with different types of crystals and copper pipes, and they actually will express Orgone energy, which they say can break up chemtrails and actually bring in clouds for rain. I also purchased some power wands, so I'll probably end up putting some of these cloud busters on these vortexes, and therefore increase the ability of those and actually pull that into the earth and radiate that from this area. So all this is right here is I just took this photo again and just zoomed into Google Earth and snipped out a piece. So you might be able to see this better now. Here's the house that I have. Here's Mother Madrone here, and I got some pictures of that because I'm going to be going to the site after this, and we're going to talk a bit about some of these things. You'll see Mother Madrone. So what I found is in this area there's a power spot. Mother Madrone, huge power spot. Over here's my well. This is where the existing growing area was. The guy had a little bit of a hemp farm going here. It didn't do very well, I don't think, but I can see why. It is in a good area so far as exposure. It's close to the well, but there's not a whole lot of power spots around it. So this may end up being like my composting area and some other uses, maybe more of like my orchard area. And I'll probably be concentrating most of my planting out over here where the power spots are. This is actually better exposure anyway. So like I said, I'm going to have my Faery Grotto, I'm going to have Mother Madrone, and I'm going to have a planting area here. So let's go out to the site and see what's going on out there.
Hello, this is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter, with Akashic Intelligence, coming to you from Eagle Medicine Ranch in Southern Oregon. Today I'm going to follow up on a previous video that I did where I actually did a site assessment from about a eagle's eye view, as you might want to say, in which I actually showed how to connect sacred power spots and natural power spots such as the Oregon Vortex and Table Rock, which was just over my right shoulder here, to this property. And as I did that, I came up with some very interesting discoveries. First of all, what I did, as you could see in the previous video that I showed, was I actually took a photograph, a much more zoomed in photograph of the actual property itself, and I used my pendulum to try to locate the energy vortexes on the property. Now you can do this with a photograph. I will say it's not as accurate, and I would always recommend actually going out to the site and doing a physical assessment. But what you can get from that is an idea of where those power spots are and where those vortexes exist. So I did that before I came out, and I showed that in the previous section of this video. And now I'm going to actually, do a physical assessment. And when I did that, I actually came up with some very interesting discoveries, as I said. One is that the power spots that I had shown on the original photograph were much larger in person when I got out here, and there were some very interesting correlations. One of the things that I talked about was as you can see, the valleys behind me, and this is what we call Sam's Valley, which is named after the Taquilama Indians chief who actually settled that area. So as we look at the property a little bit more in detail, and I'm just walking away from the area there, there's some of the areas that I had talked about that were much more, say, higher in Bg3 than the rest of the property. The first thing that I actually would like to show here is Mother Madrone, and I talked a little bit about Mother Madrone on one of the previous, and there she is. That's Mother Madrone right there. See, she at this point, Mother Madrone is quite an extensive tree. She's a multi-trunk madrone tree, and at her base is very, very high concentration of Bg3. The other point that I'd found was that there was a power spot, because as I'm looking at the property, I'm trying to figure out where I want my gardens, where I want certain things. I have ordered a cloud buster to put on the property, so I actually want to identify where the vortexes are so I can actually place that cloud buster on that vortex so I can get the maximum benefit out of it. One thing that I did find was, as I was looking at the different areas on the property and mapping, the area I'm standing on right now, I actually, on the photograph, found a power spot. The thing that I didn't realize was that the power spot actually was almost like a power path. It's about 8 feet wide, and it goes all the way to this back fence in the back here, way back in the back. So it goes all the way back to this back fence, and it's quite extensive. So it's probably about, I don't know, 50 feet long and 8 feet wide. So I'm pretty happy about that. So that's actually where I'll probably put my garden. And the original owner of this property that I bought it from had actually had the garden up in the upper, it'd be the southeast corner. And when I actually looked at that area, there was no power spots in that area at all. So I'll probably end up putting my garden in this area, which it has the best exposure anyway. It has the best southwest exposure. And like I said, it sits on a power spot, which is kind of strange because as I actually, looked at this power spot, it actually runs right into Mother Madrone, and it runs out all the way past the fence. So this may have been at one time, and I'm just guessing, okay, that's not trying to say I know for sure, but this may have been a sacred spot that the Indians may have used to come up, and they may have actually camped here at one time, because this could be called almost like a ley line. When you have this much Bg3 on one earth line, it could be considered a ley line, like the Michael and Mary lines in England that run through. And so a ley line is really where it's a path of travel that goes from sacred power spot to sacred power spot. So I'm going to have to look on the map when I get home and see where this line may go to from Mother Madrone out. Now, the one thing that I did find is that as I line up this way with the end of the power spot, these two lines align with Table Rock. So in this direction, we're aligning with Table Rock, which is, like I had explained earlier, was another sacred power spots, the Tacoma Indians. And that is what I was trying to do, was tie these places together. So I looked at this, and as I was going around the entire property, this is a 5-acre piece. The top, I have about 3 acres, 3.5 acres that are pretty level on top, but then it actually goes down in the back. Now, one thing that I did find as I went in the back, there is actually another power spot back there also, which I was thinking about making into like a fairy habitat, working with Paul Aziz, looking at how to connect with elemental beings. One of the things he does is connect with fairies, and that's kind of like through the Celtic or the Druid tradition. And so you want to keep that area in the back more natural. So you want to create a habitat where you can actually inspire nature elementals to come and visit that area. Now, the other thing that I found as I was doing this, as I was starting to run into a lot of Bg3 areas. And what I found was that every time I ran into one, they were pretty much on what you would call a trail, right? A game trail, in which the deer use and so on, and other animals that are around here. And what I found was that a lot of these, there's a lot more lines running through the property that are game trails. And I found like the highest concentration in these areas of where a game trail was. There was always high concentrations of Bg3. So maybe that's how these, Michael and Mary lines get started. They start off with game trails because the game is following, the natural animals are following this Bg3 line to wherever sacred power spot or place they want to eat or whatever. And then humans come later and they pick up the same trail because sometimes those trails are been well worn and they actually, don't have vegetation in them. And sometimes they're the easiest path to go also. Not always, but even on my path in the back, they are pretty much along areas that are easier to traverse. So in the back, I found quite a bit of Bg3 on all these game trails. And so I think what I'm going to try to do is incorporate, the design, allowing these game trails to somehow stay open, or at least to reroute them so that the game can pass through, while fencing off my gardens and so on, so I don't have to worry about all the deer eating them. I'll probably plant them some extra vegetation so they can stop along the way. But I'm also going to plant quite a bit of natural habitat for butterflies and moths and bumblebees. I've gotten some mixes for that, some wildflower mixes and wild plant mixes, so I can keep my pollinator garden going also. So as I said, I'm going to put my one of my beds down here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make some what they call Hugelkultur beds, right? So with Hugelkultur, you actually can take pieces of wood, like long pieces of, say, lodgepole pine or different branches that are long and straight, and stack them up to actually form your beds, and then drive in some say 1/2 inch rebar or 3/4 inch concrete forming stakes to make that bed. And what happens over time is that wood will deteriorate and make the bed much more fertile. Plus, it's very cheap to put these beds up. So, to buy, 20.
Hello. I'm back from my journey out to Eagle Medicine Ranch, and I thought I would just finish up with a little wrap up and put some of the things that we talked about on the Google Earth project that we've been working on. So if you refer to the screen that I have up on my share screen here, I do have the project back up on the screen, and I've actually put in some of the items that we talked about. The one thing that I did put in here was, these purple lines here, which is the area which I talked about at the site as being maybe a possible ley line of some sort, because it was about 8 feet wide and it went basically from these points all the way across the street to where I went and checked it out. I also found this game trail that went through here, and there was some Bg3 power spots. And I talked a little bit about how game trails can do express the Bg3 qualities and power spots along the trail. Also, I located the Faery Grotto that I talked about. The one interesting thing that I did find as I was doing this was that as all these lines that I had created earlier actually all centered on Mother Madrone. Because as I've zoomed out here, it was kind of a strange thing that there was Crater Lake, the Orgone Vortex over here. So we have the Orgone Vortex, we have Table Rock, all going to Mother Madrone. We have up here, we have Crater Lake that goes and down here we have, so all three of those spots actually converge right on Mother Madrone on the property. So I don't, so there might be a lot of sacredness to that tree, as I've talked about. One thing that I also talked about was that when I was putting on these ley lines, I thought that maybe they connected somewhere over here. But then as I looked at this on this map, and that's why I like doing it, this kind of thing on Google Earth, because I can keep going in and out and getting a better perspective, was they actually align with the Crater Lake line. So that was kind of amazing that these ley lines that I found, because when I had done the photograph, as talked about earlier at the very beginning, I just found one kind of power spot, but when I went out site to verify it, I found that there was actually these ley lines and I did verify that Mother Madrone, there was a line there also. So as I began to look at this whole area, I began to realize that I can begin to lay out the areas that I want to. And it helps stay in Google Earth because I have a project I can share with others, and I can see an overall context of the entire world and the cosmos. And as we begin to work with all these different energy forms, it's best if you can get the largest possible view of all the energies that incorporate on your site.
The last thing I want to show you is what I call Chief Sam's treehouse here. It was a treehouse that's built into a madrone that looks over Sam's Valley, and just gives you the reminder that there is people here before us, and we should always honor their traditions and their memories. And like I said, as I sat at Mother Madrone's feet when I first bought the property, I felt a lot of sorrow in communing with her. And so that's an area that I think we need to heal. At least I need to heal this part of the land and hopefully heal this valley. And when I put in the cloud busters and when I put in some of the biogeometry features that I'm looking at, I hope that they can actually heal this area and actually transmute these energies all the way to the valley. Since my other home is down the valley, I'll have a cloud buster there also, and we'll be doing some biogeometry there. So hopefully we can start what we call the Orgone or Oregon belt, right? Which is Orgone devices that go from basically alphabetic farms all the way to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, because there's quite a bit of Orgonite and Orgone generators that have been installed in Idaho also. So with that being said, please, if you like this, please like and subscribe, and give me some comments of what you're thinking. I'm trying to show the way that I actually design. As you know, I'm an architect also. Design a property before I begin to construct anything, so they can lay it out and actually get the highest and best use of the property while incorporating the features of the earth energies, the natural habitat, the game trails, and how the animals and other beings may use this property, including elementals such as fairies, gnomes, and other things that may use this as their home. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Again, please like and subscribe. And this is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI, saying thank you.